if she hasn't had the children herself, or Harry hadn't been involved, then they can't be in the royal line.
The studio looked calm until one woman opened her mouth. A&D sent shockwaves straight through Harry A&D Meghan's world. What was supposed to be another ordinary television morning suddenly turned into a national firestorm when Angela Levin sat down, adjusted herself, and delivered a calm but devastating announcement that nobody saw coming. No shouting, no drama, no wild gestures. Just quiet words carrying explosive weight. And sometimes those are the most dangerous kind. Within minutes, clips were spreading everywhere, phones were buzzing, and the internet was already in chaos. Because this was not random gossip from a stranger. This was Angela Levin, a woman who has spent years around the royal machine, who knew Prince Harry closely enough to write about him with rare access, and who understands exactly where the pressure points are. When someone like that chooses to speak now, people listen, and powerful people panic. She didn't begin with insults. She didn't need to. She began with questions. Questions about Archie, questions about Lilibet, questions about why the births of two children tied to one of the most famous families on earth were handled so differently from every royal birth the public had seen before. That was the moment the room changed. You could feel it. Presenters stiffened, smiles faded. Even the air looked uncomfortable because Angela was not attacking children. She was exposing patterns. She was comparing tradition against secrecy, openness against confusion, protocol against silence. And once those comparisons were spoken aloud, they could never be unheard. For generations, royal births followed a script almost sacred in its precision. Public notices, timelines, named doctors, official confirmations, locations, times, weights, a record so exact it left no room for chaos. That was how monarchy protected legitimacy. But when Archie arrived, delays, missing details, unclear timelines, controlled images, minimal access, questions with no answers. Then Lilibet's arrival only deepened the mystery. Why the difference? Why the fog? Why the selective privacy only when scrutiny appeared? Angela didn't accuse. She simply placed the facts side by side and let the silence scream. That is what made this moment lethal. Because people can dismiss outrage. They can dismiss screaming critics. But calm logic is harder to escape. Angela's tone remained measured while the implications grew larger with every sentence. If titles matter so much, why ignore the traditions tied to those titles? If royal status is important enough to defend publicly, why reject the transparency that comes with it? If privacy is the true goal, why keep stepping back into the spotlight whenever sympathy, branding, or leverage is needed? Those contradictions landed like hammer blows. And then came the reaction behind palace-adjacent walls. According to whispers surrounding the fallout, Harry was anything but relaxed. Calls reportedly began flying, meetings suddenly urgent, pressure rising fast. Because here was the nightmare scenario no strategist wants. A respected mainstream voice saying publicly what online critics had whispered for years. Once that happens, the conversation changes forever. It moves from rumor to legitimacy, from fringe to front page, from comment section to national record. That threshold had just been crossed. Ask yourself one brutal question. If the answers are simple, why the panic? If everything is straightforward, why the rush? If documentation is clear, why the tension? The public noticed this contrast immediately. On one side was Angela Levin, composed and steady. On the other side were reports of stress, urgency, visible discomfort, calm versus chaos, precision versus reaction. And once people saw that split screen, they couldn't stop talking about it. The reaction became bigger than the original statement. But then another shadow appeared. Meghan's silence. No bold statement, no appearance, no immediate counterattack, nothing. For a couple who built an empire on speaking out, being heard, correcting narratives, and telling their truth, the silence was thunderous. Social media instantly began asking where she was, because this controversy touched her directly. Her pregnancies, her children, her choices, her image. Yet Harry seemed to be carrying the heat alone. That raised a second wave of speculation. Was it strategy, distance, disagreement, protection? Nobody knew. But uncertainty feeds scandal like oxygen feeds fire. And beneath all the royal smoke, two children remained trapped at the center. Archie and Lilibet did not ask for this. They did not ask to become symbols, shields, bargaining chips, or mysteries. Yet every decision around them seems wrapped in performance and control, revealed when useful, hidden when useful, mentioned when sympathy is needed, protected when scrutiny rises. Angela's most cutting point was not about crowns or titles, it was about childhood. What happens when children grow older and search their own names? What happens when the internet hands them years of debate about their beginnings? That digital shadow does not disappear, it waits. Then comes the coldest contradiction of all, the titles. Harry and Meghan said they wanted freedom, privacy, distance from the institution. They left the system. They criticized the system. They moved across the ocean. Yet the prince and princess titles remain attached to the children. Why? If normal life is the goal, titles complicate everything. They bring attention, pressure, targets, endless symbolism. So why keep them? Angela reportedly posed that question sharply, and it cut deep. Because if titles are not for the children's benefit, then whose benefit are they really for? Within 48 hours, the storm was global. British tabloids exploded. American shows dissected royal protocols. Online creators made timelines, reaction videos, breakdowns, theories, debates. New audiences who never cared about royalty suddenly cared very much. That is how modern scandal works. It becomes an ecosystem. Every unanswered question creates 10 more. Every silence becomes evidence. Every delay becomes a clue. Every reaction becomes content. And once that machine starts spinning, almost nobody can stop it. Now the real pressure begins. Because Angela Levin did something deceptively simple, she asked questions publicly that had floated privately for years. She gave them legitimacy, timing, and reach. She didn't need to prove everything. She only needed to expose what looked missing. And in scandal politics, gaps can be more dangerous than accusations. Gaps invite imagination. Gaps create distrust. Gaps make people wonder what else they are not being told. So where does this go next? Harry and Meghan still hold the only tool powerful enough to end it: clarity. They can explain. They can document. They can step away. They can stop feeding contradictions. Or they can continue choosing silence, selective appearances, symbolic titles, and emotional reactions while the questions grow teeth. Because one truth now hangs over everything. It was not Angela Levin's words that shook the world most. It was what happened after she said them. The longer this story lived, the more dangerous it became. Because scandals built on one shocking moment often fade quickly, but scandals built on unanswered questions grow stronger with time. Every hour that passed without a clear response made Angela Levin's words feel heavier. Every delay looked deliberate. Every silence looked strategic. And in the ruthless court of public opinion, strategy is often interpreted as guilt. That is why this controversy refused to die. It wasn't just about what was said on television anymore. It became about what was not being said afterward. The public began noticing something uncomfortable. When Harry and Meghan control the stage, they speak endlessly. When someone else controls the spotlight, they disappear. That pattern suddenly looked impossible to ignore. Prince Harry, once sold to the world as the rebellious but lovable prince, now appeared trapped inside a cycle of reaction. Every new controversy seemed to drag him back into the same storm: tension, emotional pressure, defensive whispers, frantic damage control. And this time, the criticism was not coming from anonymous trolls or hostile tabloids. It was coming from someone who knew him, understood him, and once had enough trust to tell his story publicly. That made this sting differently. Critics can be dismissed. Former insiders asking calm questions cannot. Angela Levin's credibility changed the battlefield completely. Suddenly, the usual defenses looked weak. Suddenly, outrage looked rehearsed. Suddenly, the prince looked cornered. Then there was Meghan's absence, and the absence became its own headline. People noticed how often she had stood front and center when accusations were aimed outward, but how invisible she became when questions pointed inward. That contrast spread quickly. During the Oprah interview, she was clear, confident, commanding. During documentaries, she was present, polished, emotionally expressive. During speeches and appearances, she knew how to hold the frame. But when this controversy centered directly on her children's births and the public contradictions surrounding them, she vanished from sight. Whether that silence was tactical or accidental almost didn't matter anymore. Optics were doing the damage all by themselves, and optics can destroy faster than facts. That is the brutal truth of celebrity life. Millions of people do not read documents or wait for evidence. They watch behavior. They study timing. They compare reactions. They feel tone. In this case, the optics were merciless. One woman calmly asking questions, one prince reportedly under pressure, one duchess nowhere visible, two children trapped at the center, and a palace in the background saying almost nothing. It looked like a script nobody wanted, but everyone was watching. And the more it looked like that, the more viewers leaned in. There was also a deeper emotional layer many people began discussing quietly. Why does everything involving Harry and Meghan seem to become war? Why does every disagreement escalate into a global narrative battle? Why does every personal matter become a branding crisis? Their lives once promised liberation, peace, healing, privacy. Yet years later, controversy follows them like a shadow. Interviews created backlash. Memoirs created backlash. Deals created backlash. Family attacks created backlash. And now, even their children's earliest stories were dragged into the storm. Some observers began asking whether they had escaped royal pressure only to build a different prison around themselves. Meghan faces a similar reality. She once presented herself as a modern outsider entering an ancient institution. Many sympathized. Many admired her confidence. But years of selective storytelling, aggressive media battles, and constant image management created a new perception among critics. Someone always shaping narrative, always calculating angles, always appearing when useful and disappearing when risky. Fair or unfair, that image now shadows her. And in public life, perception often becomes harder to defeat than reality itself. That is why Angela Levin's appearance struck so hard. She did not need scandalous claims. She did not need sensational evidence. She used something much more powerful: timing plus trust plus contradiction. She spoke when fatigue with endless drama was already growing. She spoke as someone seen as informed, and she spoke by highlighting contradictions people had already sensed but not yet heard expressed so bluntly. That combination can detonate reputations. Now the future hangs on one brutal choice. Harry and Meghan can continue the cycle: selective silence, reactive pressure, symbolic status, controlled appearances, endless tension. Or they can do the one thing they have always seemed reluctant to do consistently: choose clarity over theater. Not emotional interviews, not vague statements, not hints, not documentaries. Clarity. Honest, simple, direct answers followed by genuine privacy. Because if privacy is real, it requires disappearance from the battlefield, not occasional returns whenever advantage appears. Until then, the questions remain alive. Why were things handled so differently? Why defend titles while rejecting the structure behind them? Why does silence appear exactly when clarity is needed most? Why does every controversy seem to multiply instead of end? Those questions now belong to the public conversation, and once questions reach that stage, they are almost impossible to erase. In the end, Angela Levin may have exposed something larger than one royal dispute. She exposed a pattern. Whenever calm scrutiny arrives, chaos follows. Whenever contradictions are named, panic appears. Whenever clarity could end everything, silence takes its place. That pattern is what people are truly reacting to now. Not one interview clip, not one television segment. A pattern repeated too many times to ignore. And that is why this story still feels unfinished. Because the loudest part was never Angela speaking. It was the silence that followed. The silence from those who always claim they want to be heard. The silence from those who say truth matters most. The silence from those holding all the answers while the world keeps guessing. Sometimes silence protects innocence. Sometimes silence protects strategy. And sometimes silence becomes the most revealing statement of all.